And kia ora, thank you so much for joining us for our weekend weather update and the outlook for next week. And just a quick programming note, Sean, our editor, he's away on a conference at the moment, so we don't have the usual bells and whistles and intro and all that sort of stuff. So this is just the video and me, so hopefully it's still okay. Let's take a look and see what's going on, because spring is really about to peak across Australia and New Zealand over the next few days, and you might have felt that it was already doing that over the last couple of months, but we've got a lot more unsettled weather coming through. Two big areas of low pressure. This is actually the main one, and the jet stream, which sort of is the boundary between polar air and the temperate climate we usually have. This is the jet stream here coming right up and around. So a big temperature drop for Western Australia, which is going to spread across Aussie, at least the southern half of it, over the weekend, and then it spreads into the New Zealand area next week. Now, at the moment, the New Zealand area has this large low pressure zone pulling down mild airflows from the north, which is the reason why we're seeing downpours and isolated thunderstorms. But notice the high pressure belt here in yellow underneath it all. That's basically cutting off energy for that system. So the low around New Zealand can't get any bigger than it already is. So we do have thunderstorms around at the moment. Here's the animated map from Weather Watch and IBM showing the big low in the Tasman and a smaller one out here near the Chatham Islands. Part of the reason I wanted to show you this is we're getting a few people wondering where the thunderstorms are when they're in the forecast. Look at this airflow coming down here around Banks Peninsula, up and around, does a sort of backwards S shape. It's airflows like that around our mountains and ranges that guide the thunderstorms, a little bit like a stick in a stream. It sort of goes with the current. And so this is the reason why it may not always go exactly how you expect. So why are you all seeing thunderstorm icons, or many of you in northern parts of New Zealand? Well, this is the thunderstorm risk map we have at Weather Watch, and this is for Friday afternoon up until about 6 p.m. What you're seeing is in areas with blue and green, that's only a low to moderate risk. But once you start getting into that moderate risk, that's when the thunderstorm icon pops up on your Weather Watch app or your forecast. So once that occurs, these maps are important to sort of figure out, well, is this a really high risk? And it's not. It's down in the moderate section. If it was high, it would be up in the red. So we're seeing a moderate risk for thunderstorms, a low risk in many areas with the blue, but that's just enough to trigger that thunderstorm icon. Put this another way. If you think of that risk area in the blue and green as being like sand, in the afternoon, it's like someone scoops all the sand, pushes it all up into a peak. And that's what happens. We have an area there when the thunderstorms are more likely to be around the mountains and ranges and less likely elsewhere. Take a look at Saturday afternoon, same time zone, lunchtime to 6 p.m. And again, similar low to moderate risk across a large portion of the North Island. So again, more thunderstorm icons, even though you may not get one right at your house. Let's take a look at rainfall on the way. So some heavy falls through central parts of the North Island, the ranges in the south, and around the Nelson Ranges, and even parts of Canterbury, dry Canterbury. So we're seeing totals there between 40 and 70 millimetres. Now, if you get that in Canterbury, that's the end of people worrying about how dry it's been over the last wee while. So plenty of variety in the weather, and also these downpours can add more than what you're seeing here. This is just a glance at the country. It's a good way to figure out whether your region is roughly in the risk zone or not. But obviously, go to our website to drill down for more details. Over in Australia, also your 3-day rainfall shows plenty of rain up here around Darwin, down to about Wolf Creek, and then further down around Victoria and parts of South Australia and into Tasmania, with the heaviest falls in the mountains and ranges of Tassie, around about 45, 50 millimetres coming there. So it's not a huge amount, but it's just more rain on the way. So let's make sense of it all. Here we are at the weekend. So on Saturday, look at this big cold southerly coming through. The southern half of Australia is basically cooler than average right across this weekend as a result of this very big southerly. And like I say, the polar jet stream, you can also see that in the blue here, showing that colder air going northwards. But look at the tropical line dropping south, which means temperate air, not too hot, not too cold, is just in the middle part right there. Over in New Zealand, low pressure in charge. See the downpours hit and miss once again, but perhaps leaning a little bit more to the western side of the North Island. And certainly we're seeing rain in Canterbury there on Saturday. So those dry farms, probably not so much of a dry farm by the time you get into Sunday. Now here is Sunday, still got a few showers around Canterbury, but mostly up now around Nelson and Marlborough. The low pressure system that has been around for the past few days finally falls apart on Sunday because it doesn't have that energy maker spinning it anymore. So we see more downpours, maybe a few isolated thunderstorms as the westerlies arrive. And speaking of the westerlies, look at these windy westerlies blowing through Victoria, Tasmania, coastal parts of South Australia, stormy kind of stuff coming through. So we kick off next week with exactly that, stormy weather. Monday, look at the gales through Bass Strait, gales around this storm down in the Southern Ocean, and windy weather around New Zealand. We probably won't be seeing too much in the way of gales, but certainly in some of these areas like Cook Strait and down around Foveaux Strait, those areas could certainly see some windy weather and the rain along the western coastline. And as we go through into lunchtime, you can see, excuse me 1 second, we've just got a new guest here in the studio who's just walked in. Thank you very much, Dylan. The joys of recording from home when you've got no other staff around. Okay, let's continue on. So windy weather blows through these areas like Bass Strait, and we're seeing gale force winds. These are purple areas showing winds of up to 100 kilometres an hour in those zones. So pretty windy. Windy in Melbourne, not so bad in Hobart, and windy in Sydney as well. Could be seeing gale force gusts around Sydney from that western side. Now as we get to Tuesday, now the gale force winds are more likely in the New Zealand area. We're seeing very strong winds coming through, nor'westers across the North Island and the Upper South Island, and heavy rain over on the west coast. So those totals will accumulate. Go to the Rural Weather website if you need to lock in more details, but certainly a stormy day from about Melbourne all the way over to Wellington, New Zealand. Now let's get to Wednesday. That stormy system moves through, the cold front moves through overnight, and now we're seeing a temperature drop because it's a cold front, which means afterwards it gets colder. Same system that's come through Australia, not as aggressive for New Zealand, but certainly the lower half of the South Island, the blue line showing that's the polar, basically, but the polar jet stream is just going to brush the southern parts of New Zealand, so temperatures will take a bit of a hit on Wednesday. And by Thursday, still cold, but it's all starting to move away. The Chatham Islands are windy, the North Island has windy westerlies. All of next week is basically windy in the New Zealand area. Classic spring weather when you think about it. And behind it all, high pressure here, and there's another high out in the Indian Ocean. So there's certainly a lot going on. You could even say it's raining cats and dogs, but in my studio it's just raining cats. That is all from me. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday.